an overarching idea would be, can JD Vance carry MAGA into the future? And then I think JD Vance kind of lays out a little bit more detailed in how he perceives America should be in this first clip. And then the second clip is Tucker talking about it. 2020.
Globalization. The first is assuming that we can separate the making of things from the design of things. The idea of globalization was that rich countries would move further up the value chain while the poor countries made the simpler things. You would open an iPhone box and it would say designed in Cupertino, California. Now, the implication, of course, is that it would be manufactured in Shenzhen or somewhere else. And yeah, some people might lose their jobs in manufacturing, but they could learn to design, or to use a very popular phrase, learn to code. But I think we got it wrong. It turns out that the geographies that do the manufacturing get awfully good at the designing of things. There are network effects, as you all well understand. The firms that design products work with firms that manufacture. They share intellectual property, they share best practices, and they even sometimes share critical employees. Now, we assume that other nations would always trail us in the value chain, but it turns out that as they got better at the low end of the value chain, they also started catching up on the higher end. We were squeezed from both ends. Now, that was the first conceit of globalization. I think the second is that cheap labor is fundamentally a crutch, and it's a crutch that inhibits innovation. I might even say that it's a drug that too many American firms got addicted to. Now, if you can make a product more cheaply, it's far too easy to do that rather than to innovate. And whether we were offshoring factories to cheap labor economies or importing cheap labor through our immigration system, cheap labor became the drug of Western economies. And I'd say that if you look in nearly every country from Canada to the UK that imported large amounts of cheap labor, you've seen productivity stagnate. I don't think that's not a total happenstance. I think that the connection is very direct. Now, one of the debates you hear on the minimum wage, for instance, is that increases in the minimum wage force firms to automate. So a higher wage at McDonald's means more kiosks. And whatever your views on the wisdom of the minimum wage, I'm not going to comment on that here. Companies innovating in the absence of cheap labor is a good thing. I think most of you are not worried about getting cheaper and cheaper labor. You're worried about innovating, about building new things, about the old formulation of technology is doing more with less. You guys are all trying to do more with less every single day. And so I'd ask my friends, both on the tech optimist side and on the populist side, not to see the failure of the logic of globalization as a failure of innovation. Indeed, I'd say that globalization's hunger for cheap labor is a problem precisely because it's been bad for innovation. Both our working people, our populists, and our innovators gathered here today have the same enemy. And the solution, I believe, is American innovation.
Josh, you're not a Vance fan too much, but I do think you would resonate with what he said there. And, you got a little issue with him and Theo backing, but would you say that JD Vance is authentic in what he says here? Or would you say that he is the greatest method actor that has ever graced the stage?
So I'll be totally honest with you. Because when you sent me that clip,
I like that. I like when you're honest.
When you sent me that clip yesterday, I said to you in person when we were working, I was like, this at face value makes me, I'm eating my lunch here, it doesn't make my argument look good.
Sure.
It makes me look a little bit more like a schizo when I say that I'm suspicious of Vance. Now, with that being said, I don't disagree with any of the words that came out of his mouth. I think, and I think that actually is really beneficial rhetoric, which is what you say about Vance. Because I don't think you're totally you've hinted that you're a little suspicious of him.
All of these politicians should be questioned.
Oh,
even
yeah,
Trump.
yeah.
I mean, they're all inflated on some level, but yeah, I think JD Vance has made a kind of an arc, at least from his never Trump Obama 11 years.
Right. And so all the things he said in the past, like I basically believe he's a not a grifter, but basically like a deceiver. Like he's here to make the right wing more moderate and less conservative, like socially conservative, less of like a white identitarian, like that kind of stuff. And nothing I've seen has made me question that in of itself. The thing that I was basically questioning myself on when I saw this clip was, is this benefiting Silicon Valley? Is this benefiting Elon Musk and by extension, Peter Thiel? Because bringing manufacturing back to the United States doesn't necessarily benefit those companies. That being said, it doesn't hurt them either.
Does it benefit Vivek in Ohio?
It just might.
That just popped in my head. If Ohio,
that's a good point.
Vivek wins Ohio, he wants to turn Ohio into the manufacturing Silicon Valley. And if we're making these arguments,
here's what I think, and this is what sounds schizo about it, is I think, if you were to say years ago, like these companies, they don't want to bring manufacturing back to the United States, but now they're advocating for that. Why is that? And I think this is where it's going to sound schizo. It's because they've accepted this as a reality, because the American people, the masses, it has been put into their heads, anti-NAFTA. They felt the effects of it, and there's no way you're going to convince them that offshoring manufacturing is good.
You think they're trying to get ahead of that?
Yes.
That reality.
Yes, they're trying to get ahead of the reality that the American people want manufacturing back. So
it's definitely a possibility. I mean, the rhetoric that comes along with what he's saying, though, is extremely nationalistic, not in a way of just bring back manufacturing, but nationalistic in these people that we've outsourced to are not capable of acquiring our values or assimilating our values or becoming the thing that we used to be in manufacturing. He's essentially saying that they aren't capable of doing what America used to do. And so we have to bring it back to America for Americans to do the thing.
Right.
It's a competency question.
And you've said this before. We've talked about this before where, okay, so if they can't offshore the companies to foreign lands that have cheap labor, then they're going to onshore the cheap labor here. And that's what the benefit of removing the cap on H-1B visas would do, which, to my recollection, I'm not going to make any claims. I don't think J.D. Vance defended it, but I don't think he chimed in against it. So again, like that's what we call neutral evidence.
That specific
I think
issue
he was playing it.
Is caught in between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, I think he was playing it safe by not saying anything.
But the answer that he gives to that question would show a lot of where he actually is.
Which is why he didn't answer the question.
Is he going to allow the personal things in his life take precedent over the American people as a whole and the vice president seat that he holds?
Dude,
that's the question.
If Peter Thiel,
he loses on either end. He loses on either question.
If Peter Thiel,
either answer,
was just a useful, what do you call it? Like a stepping stone to get JD Vance where he was. A sugar daddy to get JD Vance to where he is. He's the vice president. He could tell Peter Thiel to sit and spin if he wanted to.
He's the vice president now, Josh. Let's see what Tucker has to say.
President Trump support him for president? That's what's on my mind. I know Trump was asked this by Brett Baer, I think, a couple months ago. And when he was asked, Trump was like, "Well, there's a lot of great people. They're all working here, and a lot of and kind of."
Who are the great people?
I don't know, but my suspicion.
I can't think of any.
Well, I think he's hired a lot of really good people for the administration.
He certainly has, but as his successor, someone who understands what Trump believes, the Trump program, Trumpism.
Yeah.
I think Trump is a transformative leader. Trump is, in a lot of ways, the most important president in the last, certainly since Roosevelt.
In our lifetime.
Well, certainly in our lifetime.
Yes.
And I think people want to leave a legacy, all of us, and great men especially do, and the only person in the entire Republican Party, from my position, who's capable of carrying on the Trump legacy and expanding it, making it what it should fully be, is J.D. Vance. I think his loyalty is without question, and his service to Trump has been profound.
Josh, I need you to disagree real quick.
Well, yeah, Tucker Carlson to CIA. So the fact that he's
He's a
saying this
spook.
only makes me more suspicious of Vance. And I mean,
I do think Tucker has his finger on the pulse of America, just
think
like
he
Rogan
does.
does. I think these people understand, the quartering. I mean, all of these independent personalities, they understand where the wind is blowing, and they're kind of moving their position. I mean, Tucker was an advocate of 9/11 and the invasion of the sand desert for like 10 years until he started kind of moving away from it, and that's where we are now.
So, and my point with Peter Thiel, because this, we talk about my boss. He's not technically my boss, but my boss, Ken Art. I work on a radio show, and he's the host of it. Former Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina. I bring up my objections and concerns about Peter Thiel to him, and his go-to response is, how does it benefit Peter Thiel to support Trump in 2016 when Trump's mainstream popularity was at its all-time low, except maybe 2020? That's his go-to response. And what I think is that these people, it's not simply like late-term reactionary. If they're there to subvert, I think their whole method is to get into these things at the ground level. I think Peter Thiel, who no one, and Ken said this to me, he hadn't heard of Peter Thiel until 2016 when he backed Donald Trump. And that's the point, to me at least, is that Peter Thiel, no one knew about him. So for him to show up and
So on the back
back
of
Donald
that-
Trump, if it failed, it would be like Peter Thiel wouldn't be negatively affected. If he supported Donald Trump and Donald Trump lost, no one would care. No one would know who Peter Thiel is, but he would still be the owner of Palantir. He would still be a CIA operative. It wouldn't matter, like if his stock dropped a little bit, it would jump back up in like a year or two.
Yeah, so
It wasn't a risk
I
for
guess
him
to
to back
this
Donald
point,
Trump.
you're saying that they're getting out ahead of everything,
Yes.
and in that you believe that Vance is going to run for 2028 and win
Yeah.
if they are correct in their backing.
Yeah. And listen, I'm
I don't
trying
think
to
JD
give Vance the benefit of the doubt.
I don't think JD Vance's president, at least in this rhetoric, is bad for America at all. As I think it would be more substantial to have, this is a hot take here, to have Vance as a president in 2028 than it is to have Donald Trump.
So I'll get real specific with you because I can't do this on Wake Up Carolina. Let's speculate a little bit here. Vance is saying things that we both agree with. Bringing manufacturing back to the United States, great. What happened? What side do you think J.D. Vance is going to take when the argument becomes, so we won the debate on we don't want to be invaded by El Salvadorian gangs. We want to get them out of here. Now we don't want to be invaded by Indians coming here legally and taking all the jobs. Which side do you think he takes on that? With an Indian wife and Indian children.
I think the question is, where does he stand on H-1Bs? Which is, we haven't gotten an answer from that. I do think, given his rhetoric, I do think that he will fall in the realm of not importing infinite Indians, and he's going to take a lot of personal flack from it. And I don't see, the question is essentially, is JD willing to sacrifice his marriage for the country? I think that is the question.
Okay, so total sidebar, total out of left field. But you and I both believe in the physiognomy debate. Physiognomy.
Yeah.
Sorry. Does he look like a guy who would disagree with his wife? That would sacrifice his marriage for the sake of the country?
I mean, 3 years ago, I would have said absolutely not.
But because he grew a beard?
It's not just the beard, man. I mean, he lost weight. he has a presence to him that's a little bit more demanding. That's why he's vice president. That's why he's able. That's he's sitting in the White House and able to kind of shout at world leaders with cameras everywhere. I mean, he's willing to take a stand on the stage like this. I mean, I guess disagree with the wife on a different is a different question. I don't know if he has to disagree with the wife to enact policy, though.
No, you're right.
No discussion. Well, and that's kind of the question I asked is.
I don't think that's going to happen.
You don't think so?
I'm not saying obviously he could.
You think he's just going to avoid it
happen.
as much as possible?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, did you see did you see his Thanksgiving Day family photo?
No.
You didn't see that? Okay, that was kind of circulating in the Groyper sphere, but it was him posting on his Twitter, Happy Thanksgiving from my family to all of America. And there was 4 white people, and it was all Indians in sandals and stuff eating on.
I think I did see that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure. I would be surprised if he didn't. But the point being is, he said in Hillbilly, or maybe it wasn't Hillbilly Elegy, but he talked about why he married his wife Usha was because he thought he resonated more with the Indian culture than he did with his own Ohio culture. Do you think he changed? Because I think personally, I'm not trying to bait you here. I'm saying
if we take the arc as it is, the answer would have to be yes. I mean, I think the time span between 2 weeks prior and 2 weeks post VP nomination is a different JD Vance. I think they're entirely different. Their demeanor is different. The way they approach things are different.
Since becoming VP.
The 2 weeks before VP and to the 2 weeks after VP.
So just in that month.
I mean, if you told me they cloned him and just gave him more confidence, I would believe it.
But okay, so that's and I'm trying to steelman your argument here. Do you think that he had these beliefs secretly, but was suppressing them because he didn't have the level of power that he does?
It's not
as
that
VP?
he didn't have the power. It's that he didn't have a power above him that was willing to back him. And that's what leadership brings about. People, when you talk, I think you and Joe talked about leadership before, and I was talking about this the other day on the X Space, where a good leader that enables his people to say the things that need to be said, even in disagreement, allows for people to say things that they aren't going to be said. A good example would be somebody like Daniel Penny, which is you could call him vigilante if you will, but him not being arrested, kind of gives people a little bit of confidence in that maybe we can protect other people without the threat of the world crashing on top of us. And in the same way of Donald Trump holding the presidency, or at least being the VP pick of Donald Trump, where you have almost a security in yourself because there's a security in leadership that you're moving forward. And so, the people at the Senate, the people in the House have a different role to play, let's say, than a vice president does. I can see where you disagree with that.
I'm not trying to do the Stephen Miller
Just
versus
say it,
CNN
dude.
lady, where basically I'm trying to understand your mindset because I kind of get that.
You say these things without honest conviction to say them. I don't think this could be an act. And I think that's kind of where you're at with it.
Okay. I'm going to just disagree with you on that because I think that
we can disagree,
he can say things that are, it's like telling a lie by telling the truth. He believes that manufacturing should come back to the United States. But does he believe it for the same reasons we do? I think you see this confidence boost in him, or this change in his rhetoric after he becomes the VP, not because he had these convictions the whole time, but because this is the facade he needs to maintain to reel in the rubes, to reel in and to appeal.
I could be wrong.
Just let me finish. Let me finish. To have mass appeal, not only to the Reaganite boomers, but also to the hardcore right-wing extremists. It's this catered message to every possible right wing. Peter Thiel, just go along with my theory now, that Peter Thiel got on the ground level to manipulate the Trump movement in case it got big. Turns out it did. So JD Vance, Peter Thiel's the puppeteer, JD Vance is the puppet. They know people like us exist. They know about the Groypers. They know about Ian Carroll. They know about Candace Owens. They know that this audience is there. So what they're doing is trying to corral them as well. It's not the left-wing view of ignore these people or try and get rid of them.
If that's the case, and they acquire this audience, and in the same voice they acquire this power, soft power or hard power, what's the end goal if it's not to give the audience what they're wanting? To subvert completely?
Okay. So
where's the off-ramp?
As we've learned many times, politicians can say things. It's about
you think it's maintaining the status quo, maintaining power to say we're going to get things done and not actually get things done?
So I think there's an element of like there's like a word for it, but I can't remember. But basically, successful failure, where JD Vance can say things like, I think when Donald Trump says he wants a wall, he wants to build a wall. What got in his way? Congress, the Republican Party itself. What JD Vance is trying to do is he can say things that he can say, I want to bring manufacturing back to the United States. That appeals to us. That appeals to normal conservatives, to boomer conservatives. Everyone agrees with that. But, and I think he'll do it, by the way, but he can say things Congress, the government is, shut down, whatever, something will get in the way. And then he can say, well, I tried, but it just didn't happen. And that's out of my control because so-and-so did this or whatever. So I think saying and doing are two different things.
Well, absolutely, saying and doing are two different things.
But I think he'll promise big, or he'll promise. You said the other day in one of our shows, he's like more America first than Donald Trump, but he's saying it in a more statesman-like fashion. I think that's exactly what he's there to be, is say the things that Donald Trump is saying in a more statesman-like way, so it appeals to moderates, but it also appeals to us. And then what happens? He gets in as president in 2028. How much of this can he deliver? He'll bring factories back to the United States, but fill them with H-1B visas.